What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Laura Likes Books. I'm Laura and I like books. Today we're going to be doing my May wrap-up. Last month I said that it was the best reading month I'd ever had in April, and that I was getting better at figuring out what kind of books I liked, and then we would find out in May if that held true, and it didn't. I had an okay month. I read 13 books overall. I had 4 3 stars, 4 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 3 5 stars. So it wasn't bad at all. But last month was just so good. And then at the beginning of May, it just I was just not getting any great ones. But overall, it was still a pretty good reading month. So like I said, I read 13 books. I think I'm gonna switch it up for this video and do the order in which I read them, as opposed to like my ranking system. So the first book I read in May was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. I gave this 3 stars, I believe. It is essentially about a woman who's 36. Her name is Kiko, and she works at a convenience store. She is a cog in the machine, as she describes, and that's like her identity. So she doesn't really know who she is outside of this worker. And so people in her life are constantly pressuring her to get a different job, or, you know, like, why aren't you married? Why don't you have a boyfriend? Why, you know, do you just live for this workplace, you know? And so she is very identified with her work and her work ethic, and so she doesn't see a problem with this, but she also is sick of everyone kind of hounding her about it. And so yeah, that's basically it. There's not a lot of action. I mean, a lot of good points were definitely made, especially around societal pressures and things like that, which I enjoyed. But for me, I think it just, like, not enough really happened for me to fully get immersed in it. But like I said, I gave it 3 stars. Definitely wasn't bad. It's also really short, so it didn't take me long to read at all. And yeah, so pretty much middle of the road. The next book I read was The Strange Library by Haruki Murakami. This is also a very tiny book, and it's really, the reason I got it from the library. It's just that it has like pictures in it. It's very cool, and it also took like no time to read at all. But I gave it 3 stars as well. I mean, just for like style alone, I think this book is really neat. But as far as story, maybe I'm just like not smart enough to get what this book was trying to do. I understand a lot of it is metaphor. Murakami is like, that's kind of what he's known for. And so there's a lot of symbolism and metaphor and really interesting ideas. I just don't think that I am smart enough to understand what he's doing. But basically we have this young boy who goes to the library, and he, I think he asks for a book, or they ask him what he's looking for. Anyway, they send him to this other part of the library that he's never seen before, and he suddenly becomes prisoner in this library, and he meets like a sheep man and this girl, and so he tries to like plot his escape. And like I said, it's really short, and I think most of it is meant to be taken, you know, not literally, but like I said, I just don't think I was able to pick up on exactly what he was trying to do here. But I still gave it 3 stars for just like the style, and the story was interesting. But yeah, so middle of the road again. The next book I read was a young adult called Ace of Spades, and I'm gonna butcher this name, but it's Farida Abike Iyamidi. And I just want to start off by saying, if I had read this book in high school, I would have definitely given it 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars, just strictly for the message and what it was trying to convey. But if I had been younger, I mean, again, it's like, I'm not a young adult, so I don't know. Maybe it's not fair for me to rate. But for story alone, there were some parts of it that I felt were a little bit rushed, and some parts that weren't fully fleshed out and like explained. But I don't know if there's like more. I think there might be more coming, like of this same, like maybe it's a series, so maybe that's why. I'm not sure, but either way, I still really enjoyed it. Basically in this one, we have this private school, this really like prestigious private school called Nevaeh, and these two characters, Chiamaka and Devon, are seniors, and they are made like prefects, like head boy and head girl, basically. And everything, well, first of all, for Devon, it's a complete shock because no one in the school has ever even paid attention to him. Chiamaka is like super popular, so it's not really a surprise for her. But they're also the only two black people at this school. And so shortly after they get made head boy and head girl, all of these anonymous text messages start being sent to everyone in the school, basically telling these two their secrets and like airing their dirty laundry and stuff like that. So, and it keeps escalating, like each secret is more intense or more serious. So the book is basically spent with them trying to figure out like who is doing this, why are they doing this, you know, what is going on. And the mystery part really intrigued me. The writing was very good. I think this is just a case of me being too old to fully appreciate it. But there were some excellent points about racism and classism made in this book. Lots of quotes that I saved in my, you know, my bookmark thing. And so yeah, it was definitely very good. 4 stars. The next book I read was Death in Her Hands by Otessa Moshfegh. I gave this one 4 stars. And this book was so interesting to me. First of all, we have this old woman named Vesta, and she lives on her own. She's really elderly. She lives in the woods, just like completely by herself. And she's out walking her dog one day, and she finds this note. Let me find it. So I can't remember exactly what it says. So she finds a note and says, "Her name was Magda. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me. Here is her dead body." But there's no body and there's no clues. It's literally just this note. And so the entire book is spent in Vesta's mind. And I really enjoyed this. And I actually related to Vesta a lot, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But it's not like a mystery. It is, but it's like, it's not your typical mystery. It's literally just this woman's thought process for like days on end. And so if that's not something that you are into, you probably won't like this. But I think this way, like my thoughts are very circular as well. And so I actually enjoyed hearing Vesta's thinking. And she basically just like makes up this entire story based on this note that like she just builds this entire, you know, story out of it in her mind, which may or may not be true. And it's the only reason it wasn't a 5-star is there were parts that were kind of slow and boring. Some people might find the whole thing boring because it's literally just this lady's rambling thoughts. But for me, I thought it was really interesting how your mind can, you know, left to your own devices, your mind can do all kinds of things. You know, this lady has minimal interaction with other people. She is just left to her thinking. She has like a dog and that's it. So, you know, it's almost like you're witnessing the unraveling of this woman's mind, which I found fascinating. But again, that's, you know, up to your own likes and dislikes. The next book I read was called Bathhouse by PJ Vernon. This one I also gave 4 stars. In this one, we're following a guy named Oliver and his husband, Nathan. And Nathan is out of town. He's like this surgeon, so he's out of town like giving speeches and you know, at seminars and stuff like that. And Oliver is home by himself. He's a recovering addict. While Nathan's out of town, he decides to go to this bathhouse and have like an anonymous encounter, sexual encounter. And instead, he barely escapes with his life. Like he goes to the place, he hooks up with this dude and the dude tries to kill him. So he makes it out, but he, you know, is covered in bruises and, you know, is like really shaken up. And so the rest of the book is just kind of like this escalation of lies that he has to keep telling to like cover up the fact that he cheated. There's more to it, but that's like the gist. And I really like this one. I feel like for kind of a thriller, it actually went deep, talked a lot about addiction, which I love in a book, and you know, some deeper issues with like relationships. I also thought the conclusion made sense for the most part. I mean, the whole thing's a little bit unrealistic, but as far as like a thriller, mystery thriller goes, it checked out. There's nothing worse than like an ending that like literally just doesn't make sense. But this one did. Yeah, overall, I thought it was a fun time. Okay, so the next book I read was Verity by Colleen Hoover. And this one I gave 4.5 stars. Colleen Hoover is becoming one of my favorite authors. I read All Your Perfects a few months ago and gave that one 5 stars. And to be honest, the only reason I gave Verity 4.5 and not 5 is because I wanted to differentiate that I really liked All Your Perfects more. But I struggled between a 4.5 and a 5 star for Verity. On this one, we have this woman, Lowen, who is an author. She's like a struggling author. She finds out that one of her favorite authors, Verity Crawford, has been in like a car accident. She's completely paralyzed, has like no brain function. And so they are asking Lowen to essentially pick up Verity's book series that she's been working on and finish her series for her. And she doesn't want to do it at first, but it's a really good opportunity. And so she goes to Verity's house, where her husband, Verity's husband, Jeremy, lives, and their son, Crew. Jeremy basically tells her that in Verity's office are all the notes that she's going to need to finish this series. And there are notes, but what Lowen also finds in the office is this manuscript that Verity had written that seems to be real life, and it's disturbing. And so that's pretty much all I can say without spoiling anything, but it gets really dark. There are definitely dark and disturbing things happening in this book. Yeah, so it gets pretty intense. And yeah, overall, like I said, I wanted to give it a 5 star, but I didn't like it as much as All Your Perfect, so I felt like I had to make that distinction, but it was a definite 4.5. Next up, I read Such a Quiet Place by Megan Miranda. I gave it a 3 star. I think this may have just been a case of me having too high of expectations. I knew it was like a slow burn mystery, and it kind of was, but it almost felt more like a drama, which just wasn't like what I was expecting. So it could have been me just like expecting something different. And in this one, we have this like quiet little neighborhood, and everyone, you know, the neighbors are super close to each other, and they all have like, you know, community barbecues and things like that, until 2 of the people that live there, this couple, are murdered. And so everyone in the town knows that this girl, Ruby, who lives right next door, she's the one that did it. And so she ends up going to prison, but then she gets out like a year later. I think it's like a year later, or like 2 years. And she comes back to the neighborhood and just kind of like acts like nothing happened, and her like moves it back in with her old roommate Harper. Harper's like the point of view that the book is told from, and so everyone's just kind of like, why is she back, like what's going on? And so Ruby is basically, you know, claiming her innocence still, even after all this time. And so yeah, it just kind of follows like, you know, what really happened and who's really responsible. And it was fine. I think what really bothered me about this book was the heavy-handedness with the message. Like, there were so many times that she brought up like how you don't truly know your neighbors, and how, you know, if they would just communicate with each other, like these misunderstandings wouldn't happen. And, you know, you never really know what people are hiding. They seem so, you know, innocent on the outside, and like, whatever. That's all true. Completely agree. But like, she said it over and over and over, like in every chapter. And so after a while, I was just like, yeah, I get it. You don't know your neighbors. Like, so what? Like, I don't care about any of these people. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I still gave it 3 stars. So like, I was obviously interested in the story, but it's just, yeah, I felt like the messaging was a little too much. Next book I read was Recursion by Blake Crouch. This was a 5-star read, like, no question. I freaking loved this book so much. I read Dark Matter, what year was that? Like 2017 or 2018? I don't know, somewhere around there. And I gave it 5 stars as well. Blake Crouch is just like so good at creating, like, it's like sci-fi, but it feels so real. Like, he's so good at like including reality, but like mixing it with sci-fi so that it feels like it could happen, which is kind of scary, but I love it. And this is one that I wish I could just like spoil so badly. But basically in this one we have this guy Barry, and it's like told through his perspective, and then also this woman named Helena. And basically we have a world that's basically like our world, but there's this disease that's going around, and it's called false memory syndrome. People just wake up and have like memories of 2 lives essentially that are different from each other, but both of them feel real. And so this cop, Barry, is trying to figure out like what is causing this. And then we also have Helena, who is a what is she? She's a neuroscientist, and she is working on technology that will like save memories basically, and let people re-experience their memories like as if they were happening now. I think is the best way to describe it. And like, that's literally all I can say about it, because the rest will be spoilers. But this book, I think I might have liked better than Dark Matter, to be honest. I like Dark Matter a lot. I gave it 5 stars, but this one, like, just the content of it with memories and everything is so interesting to me. And I was like just eating up every second of this book. It was so good. So like, I got so invested in the characters, and the plot was just insane, like in a good way. There probably were some like plot holes or whatever, but I don't care. I was here for it. I love this book so much. The next book I read was Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. Now, this is another one. I gave it 5 stars. I want to spoil it so badly. I'm not going to. If anyone wants it spoiled, I'll do like a separate video. But this book was so weird and insane and good. Like, I'll set it up. So we have Louise. She is this secretary who has a little boy, and she's recently gone through a divorce, and so she is, you know, a little bit depressed, a little bit lonely, and she encounters this man at a bar one night who she really hits it off with and connects with, and they share a kiss, and that's it. And then she finds out that not only is this man her new boss, but he's also married. So then she meets the man's wife and strikes up a friendship with her. And so the more she gets involved with these 2 people, the more like weird it gets and complicated. And this book is very divisive. There's a shocking twist. There's a couple of them, but mainly I'm talking about the one at the very end. And like, I've heard a lot of people say like no one will see this twist coming, and I completely agree because it's so out there that I literally don't know how anyone could guess what's going on. And at first it kind of bothered me because, as you know, I like to be able to guess stuff. It makes me feel smart. But the more I thought about it, the more I just realized it's fine. I don't have to guess everything. And I just could not put this book down. I could not put it down. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And it wasn't like a horror book, okay? It's like a thriller mystery, but it like genuinely scared me for a few days after I was finished with it, which is like doesn't happen very often to me, and so I had to give it 5 stars. But also just the story was so good, and I literally can't say anything about it other than just read it, because it's so different. I promise it's different than anything you've read. If you like mystery thrillers, just read it. The next book I read was actually a romance book, which is weird for me, but it was called The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This was my first book by them, and kind of went back and forth between 4.5 and 5, which, I mean, a romance getting a 5 is pretty crazy for me, but I did enjoy it so much. This one we have this girl Olive. She is a twin sister. Her twin Amy is getting married at the beginning of the book. They have a ton of family that they're very close with, so they're very close with their aunts and uncles and cousins, and just very tight-knit, but like very large family. And so Olive, her thing is that she has really bad luck, whereas Amy has really, really good luck. And it almost got to the point that it was like bashing it over your head a little bit about how bad of luck Olive has, but it like stopped just short of annoying me. I could handle it. It was fine. At the beginning, though, it was brought up a lot about her bad luck. But she, how can I explain this? She is at her sister's wedding, and her brother-in-law, I forget his name, but he has a brother named Ethan. She has this like hatred for him. They're just mean to each other. But everybody gets sick at this wedding, and Olive and Ethan are the only two who don't have seafood. So they are the only two who do not get like crazy savage food poisoning. And so it just so happens that, you know, Olive's sister like begs Olive to take the honeymoon for her because, you know, it's non-refundable and blah blah blah. So of course we end up with Olive and Ethan taking this honeymoon together, since nobody else can go. And so, you know, obviously we have a situation where these two don't like each other, but, you know, forced proximity, overspending these days together, of course they end up, you know, liking each other. And it was very cute. It was really good. I was interested the whole time. The next book I read was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This one I gave 4.5. I was debating between 4.5 and 5. There were just some parts that were a little slow for me, that I felt like weren't really needed. We basically have the Richardson family, and it's Elena, I don't remember the husband's name, but they have 4 kids: Trip, Moody, Lexi, and Izzy. And Izzy is kind of like the rebel. She is very different. She's like very much the black sheep of her family. So at the beginning of the book, there has been a fire at the Richardson house, and they're all kind of talking about how they know it was the youngest sibling, Izzy, that started it. And so through the book, we find out like what has happened over the past year before this fire. And essentially, a mother and daughter have moved in to a rental house that the Richardsons own. And the mother's name is Mia, and her daughter Pearl. And Pearl becomes really good friends with the Richardson children. She ends up like just staying at their house all the time. A lot of the things that were brought up in this book were just so poignant, I felt like, you know, when it comes to like helping people, but, you know, having ulterior motives with helping them, expecting something in return, disliking people just for their difference in, you know, living style. Like Elena clearly had a problem with Mia because of Mia's like free spirit, and you get everyone's point of view as they're being talked about. And so you know, you really feel for kind of everyone, even though you might read this. I think it's one of those books that, if depending on your own upbringing, you will side with different people in the book. based on that. It's not very clear who's right and who's wrong, which I enjoyed. I think it's like up to interpretation, and that interpretation will come from your own background. Overall, definite like food for thought. Like I said, I gave it 4.5, but it was close to a 5. But yeah, there were just some parts that were not the most interesting, but I still really, really enjoyed it. The next book I read is called Convince Me by Nina Sadowski. I gave this one 3 stars. This was looking to be like a 4 or 5 star read for me for like a huge chunk of this book. And then the ending just kind of like really disappointed me. Yeah, this woman, Annie, she is saved from a car accident by this man, Justin, and they end up married, and he also has this best friend, Will. So it's told through 3 perspectives. It's Annie's perspective, Will's perspective, and then Justin's mom, Carol, her perspective. And Justin has died. So, you know, they're all at the funeral, and they're kind of like reminiscing about Justin and his life and what an impact he had on everybody. And you know, slowly they start to actually not even slowly, they start to realize that Justin may not have been who he said he was. A lot of things about his death don't make sense. There's just a lot of like missing pieces, and so the book is basically spent somewhat in the past, some in the present, and you know, kind of figuring out exactly how extensive Justin's lies were. You know, was he even remotely the person they thought he was? And it was, like I said, a huge chunk of the book was great. I hated the ending, and I also felt super unrealistic. This guy Justin was like the light of everyone's life, and he was just so generous and sweet and caring, and everybody loved him, and he was the life of the party, and you know, on and on. It took it took no time for these people to start doubting him. Annie especially. Like, I'm talking the day she got home from his funeral, she like found something and just immediately was like, he's not who I thought he was. He's not the person I thought he was at all. Like, I just feel like if you love someone and like you love them enough to marry them, right? And you know, you like, yes, you can have doubts about someone, but like, I just feel like it was so easy for her to believe that he was a liar. I just feel like it took no time for them to like just straight up start doubting him. I don't know, it kind of bothered me that they like turned on him so fast. And then yeah, the ending was just it completely let me down. So, but I still give it 3 stars because the writing was very good. I would like to read more from this author. But yeah, so 3 stars. All right, and then finally, the last book I read in May was On a Quiet Street by Serafina Nova Glass. This one I gave 5 stars. This was basically Such a Quiet Place. This book was what I wanted from Such a Quiet Place. It was like a quiet neighborhood. You know, neighbors are super tight, but this one was much better. So part of it, I think, could have been that I listened on audiobook, and Imogen Church was the narrator, and she's like my all-time favorite narrator. She's so good with like emotion, so that may have influenced my rating, but I just freaking love this book. We basically have this woman, Paige, and about a year ago, I believe, when the book starts, she lost her son Caleb. He was hit by a car, I think. He died. And then we have a neighbor, Cora, and her husband Finn, and their daughter Mia. Cora annoyed me at first. She's very like just so like twee and just saccharine, but by the end of the book I completely loved her. Like her progression as a character, just like I absolutely loved. And I think maybe she's supposed to come off as kind of annoying at first, but she's very like, you know, PTA member, like running all the bake sales, like not that there's anything wrong with that, but just like over the top, like mother, you know, perfect mother, perfect wife, you know, whatever, like just very annoyingly so. But she's like basically Paige's only friend still, because Paige is just like so horrible to everyone after losing her son, which again, understandable. But so they're friends. And then there's also this mysterious woman, Georgia, who's married to one of their neighbors, Lucas, and nobody really knows anything about her. She's, you know, very much like doesn't come out of the house, and so they're all kind of like, what's up with her? Is she just rude, or like, what's up? And so Paige is like, you know, because of her grief over her son, she's essentially just like spying on everyone all the time. I think out of boredom, and also trying to like she doesn't believe that Caleb died from an accident. She thinks it was on purpose. So she's, you know, kind of trying to fill her time with like getting clues to deal with her grief, basically. And so Cora thinks that her husband Finn might be cheating, and so Paige, you know, offers to basically spy on him and like figure out if he's cheating on Cora or not. And so that's like the basic setup. It is so good. I could not stop reading it or listening to it, because I had listened on audiobook. I could not stop listening to it. And that's pretty much all I can say without spoiling, but it was so good. There's the perspective from Paige, Cora, and then Georgia, the mysterious neighbor. And some of the turns that it took were like completely unexpected. It wasn't, you know, it's very much like not what you think is going on. And yeah, there was humor. It was just so good. It was so, like, again, it was a mystery thriller that had some deeper aspects to it, which I am finding that I love in my mysteries. So yeah, it was a 5-star. Again, Imogen Church may have been partially responsible for that 5-star, but if you do read it, I would definitely recommend the audiobook, because she is just so good at voices. That is going to do it for my May wrap up. That's all 13 books. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye.